When you're in need of help, you need experience and talent to fight for you. The educational background and accomplishments of our attorneys are what make Bordas & Bordas a premier law firm. In law, experience and talent are what matter most. Bordas & Bordas, fighting for justice.
Hi, I'm Jamie Bordas. Welcome to the Bordas & Bordas Legal Review. Each week we discuss issues affecting the Valley, the state, and our nation. This week we'll be talking about the University of Notre Dame, which has been receiving a lot of attention because of the football team, but we're going to be talking about not only football but the other aspects of the university. Here with me today are two of my law partners and fellow Notre Dame graduates, Chris Regan and Jeff Brown. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Great to be here, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
You know, Notre Dame has been in the news a lot, primarily because of the football team. 12-0, head to the national title game in Miami on January the 7th. Manti Te'o, leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy. I'd be interested to see what happens here in the upcoming week with that vote. But you know, people tend to either love Notre Dame or hate them. One way or another. Obviously, we're in the love category, having gone to school there. But you know, Chris, why do you think that people are of that feeling that they either love Notre Dame or they hate him? It doesn't seem to be any just non-opinions.
Well, I mean, Notre Dame is an inspiring university, and it has inspired a lot of people to magnificent achievements over the years, both by the graduates, the Holy Cross Fathers who teach there, and originally Father Soren who built the university. You know, that was back in 1842, I think. It was a barren wasteland. You're talking about the plains of Indiana. It was freezing, bitter cold there, and he said, this is the place where we're going to build the greatest university in the world, and he did that. And about, I want to say 30 years later, it burned to the ground. The administration building where all the students lived, where all the classes were held, where all the decisions were made, burned to the ground. And he said, you know what, we've made a mistake here. He said, we didn't build it big enough. And then they built up that golden dome that can be seen for miles around in Indiana. Of course, it's so flat out there you can see forever. And that's inspired a lot of people to great things. But anytime you do something great, you have a situation where people might want to take a shot at you. And that's been the case with the football team. It's been the case with the university. And so you have some Notre Dame haters out there. And you don't really know what they're all about or what they're doing it for. But that's what it is. They're inspired to try to take down number one.
You know, and you don't see many programs or teams that are like that. You know, maybe, Jeff, you have the New York Yankees where people have an opinion one way or another no matter what. The Dallas Cowboys, perhaps, but, you know, kind of few and far between in sports.
Yeah, and I think it's partially a function of our success and our history, and also a function of the fact that we do things the right way. And I think that Notre Dame, their athletic programs, which is obviously the most visible part of a highly visible university, people who go to Notre Dame carry themselves in a certain way. And for a certain segment of at least the college football population, I think that rubs people the wrong way. But I tend to view that as more their problem than ours. And certainly Notre Dame's success speaks for itself.
Well, that's one of the things when it comes to this particular team that's made me the most proud. When you look at the leader of the team, Manti Te'o, not only is he a great football player, but he does it in the right way. I mean, every time he goes on the air in a post-game interview, he's talking about his faith and how faith helped to get us through this game. And, of course, he's not Catholic. He's a Mormon. But to him, it was important to go to a faith-based university, regardless of which faith that may happen to be. And I think that he's kind of taken this team, put it on his shoulders, and has said, we're not only going to win, we're going to win the right way. We're going to show togetherness, family, a bond, and that's part of what's led this team to do the things it's done.
Well, I think that's a great point, Jamie, and something that people have to recognize that they may not is that Notre Dame is not just number one in football. They're number one in graduating their players, number one in graduation rate. That's across all student athletes and also within the football program specifically. It's also in respect to African-American football players. These rates are at 98, 99, 97%. For those figures, and it's astonishing. A lot of the top football programs and top basketball programs in the United States have graduation rates below 50%. Players getting used up and thrown away who never get the benefit of this college education that's supposed to be what they receive in exchange for dedicating 4 years of their life to Alabama or Auburn or Kentucky or these other schools with woeful and disgraceful graduation rates. In Notre Dame, you don't just get to play, you get the degree. And you get a lifelong support system of graduates spread out throughout the United States and the world that leads those players to great accomplishments, not just in the NFL or the NBA, but in business, in medicine, in law, and throughout our economy.
You know, one of the things that I find to be particularly interesting, being a football coach myself, albeit at the high school level, is that one of the knocks on Notre Dame in the past, 15 to 20 years has been Notre Dame isn't going to be successful again on the football field because of their high academic standards, that they can't recruit certain players because they can't get into the school or they won't be able to survive if they do get into the school. As a coach myself, I want to have intelligent players. I want to have players that can understand the schemes, that understand what we're talking about, and I think it can give you an advantage. And I've never bought into that Notre Dame can't win just because of the academic standards, and I think that's bearing out a little bit now, Jeff.
No, it is. And to get back to Manti Te'o, I think that people should appreciate who have the ability to watch these Notre Dame games, that they're viewing a truly transcendent player, somebody who not only plays incredibly well in his own right, and is the leader of our defense, but also makes every player around him better. It's truly remarkable to watch. I've had an opportunity to go to a couple of the Notre Dame games this year, and you can really see as he interacts with the other players on the sidelines how really inspiring he is. Even to the point where last night Notre Dame had a big basketball win over the University of Kentucky, where Manti Te'o, in my mind, played a big role in that. He was in the front row cheering on the other student athletes there and inspiring our student body to cheer harder for that basketball team. And it's something to really take a moment and appreciate what we have there in Manti Te'o.
You know, one of the things that's interesting, you mentioned the student body, and Chris, you went to both undergrad and law school at Notre Dame like I did. Jeff, of course, went to the United States Military Academy at West Point for undergrad and then Notre Dame Law School. But, in undergrad, the athletes actually live in the dorms with the rest of the student body. There's not a separate athletic dorm like there are at many universities. So the student body at large gets to be friends with these players, gets to know them very well, and there does form some sort of bond there that can spill over into other parts of the university.
That's right, Jamie. And when I moved into Stanford Hall my freshman year at Notre Dame, I moved into a dorm room that was right next to the room occupied by Travis Davis and Sean Wooden, names I know you'll remember. Fans of football will remember them not only from Notre Dame but from very productive NFL careers that both those guys had. They live right in the regular dorms among the regular students. And even though to look at those guys was incredible, as they're both, well over 6 feet tall, well over 225 pounds, and have just the bodies of incredible athletes, they were treated just like regular students. And, they played the video games with us in the dorm, where they went to the same parties, and we knew them as friends. And at other universities where they have dedicated athletic dorms, dedicated facilities where the athletes don't even really interact with the students, you're not having a true university experience. But that's not the same. That's not what you have at Notre Dame.
Well, one of the things that Manti Te'o mentioned, we talked about him a little bit, is that when you're a senior, they do allow the athletes to move off campus when they become a senior, which he is this year. And he said that he actually misses living in the dorm, with the exception of maybe the little bed that he had to sleep in. And I can relate to that. I remember the beds in the dorms, and they're a tiny little twin bed. And if you're a large, Division I athlete, it could certainly be uncomfortable. But they do. They're right there in the dorms, and it makes a big difference, I think, with respect to the interaction with the student body, and also with respect to in the classroom. There are not classes at Notre Dame where you're going to be taking some type of easy course to get an A or something like that. These athletes, whether they be the football players, the basketball players, whatever they were in the same classes that we were in. They were doing the same projects we were doing. I remember having some group projects with guys like Jerome Bettis from the football team, Admore White, who was the point guard on the basketball team, and really not only enjoying getting to know them, but seeing that these guys, they want to do their part in the classroom. On the project, they want to contribute. They say, hey, let me do my share. If it's 4 people in a group, let me do my quarter of the group project. And they're right there with you. They're not having some tutor do it for them, where I'm sitting there with these guys, seeing them contribute to the project. And I think that makes it that much more special, too.
You remember also from our era, Jamie, was Tim Ruddy, another player who stands out in that area. He was an outstanding All-American center for the Notre Dame football team. He went on to a tremendous NFL career after school. But while he was at Notre Dame, he was studying engineering and robotics, taking advanced calculus and courses that frankly, as a arts and letters type student, I'm not sure I could have even passed, and doing that all the while handling all of the duties and responsibilities attendant to being a Notre Dame football player. It's incredible some of the people we're able to attract to the university.
Tim actually lived in the same dorm as me, Flanner Tower, and it was interesting because I remember seeing Tim at Mass every Sunday night. We had Mass at 10 o'clock at night in the dorm, which is nice because you could sleep in the morning and still go to Mass in the evening. But I would see Tim at Mass, and he was a very, very polite guy, very respectful to everyone. He's also the first guy in the history of the NFL to obtain a perfect score on the Wonderlic test, which is the test that they give students coming out of college before they go into the NFL to see what their intelligence is, what their mental aptitude might be for the game. First guy ever to score a perfect score. That's how bright Tim Reddy was. Still is probably, but he did go on to have a great career in the NFL. You know, Jeff, you went to West Point for undergrad, also an institution, of course, that has a large focus on doing things the right way. Right. And then going on to Notre Dame Law School. You know, going to those two institutions, you know, you see a difference with respect to perhaps the football at the two schools. How are things the same? How are they different?
Well, one thing is that just listening to you guys talk about how the students at Notre Dame, the football players, are integrated with the rest of the student body, and having your star players studying engineering. When I was a senior at West Point, my roommate was the starting defensive end on our football team. Made a big play in one of the Navy games back when we used to beat Navy, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But he was also a mechanical engineering major at West Point. And in addition to doing all of the other duties and responsibilities that we all had, he would go to football practice and come back to the room, and he would be up later than anybody studying a kind of mechanical engineering, echoing what Chris said, that I didn't even want to try to understand what he was trying to do. And his grades were incredible. In addition to being one of the best football players on the team, he was one of the smartest guys I knew. And there's a lot in common, I think, between the two institutions, between Notre Dame, the institution, and West Point, the institution, where you feel like you're part of something bigger than the school itself, that there's a history there that really contributes to the experience. And you feel like that the students who have come before you are something that's very important there, and you have an opportunity to walk around historical campuses and be part of something where the guiding principles of the institution were laid down a long time ago by people who have become famous.
Well, we got to take a break here. When we come back, we'll continue talking about the University of Notre Dame. Of course, the football team's getting a lot of the attention, but we'll continue talking about not only football, but the university as a whole. Stay with us.
If you need legal help, then you need Bordas & Bordas, because our goal is to deliver the maximum result for every case we handle. Success speaks for itself. Bordas & Bordas. Our passion is to protect people.
Welcome back to the Bordas & Bordas Legal Review. We're talking today about the University of Notre Dame, which is receiving a lot of attention because of the football team, but we're talking about the university as a whole. With me are fellow Notre Dame graduates Chris Regan and Jeff Brown, also attorneys at the law firm of Bordas & Bordas with me. Before we took our break, we were talking a little bit about how, Jeff, that West Point is people that go to West Point, where you went for undergrad, feel like they're part of something bigger. But a lot of people feel that way with respect to Notre Dame, too, because when it comes to West Point, the United States Military Academy, you have a lot of people that are just enlisted in the Army that identify with that school because they have a common bond there. Same is true with Notre Dame. There are Catholics all over the country who maybe didn't go to Notre Dame, and there are a lot of people here in this valley who didn't go to Notre Dame, but they root hard for Notre Dame because they're Catholic and they can identify with the university. I think that's significant for these kids that are playing for Notre Dame because there are so many people out there that are rooting for them, and it is a big deal to so many people.
But Jamie, I think one of the reasons that people feel that way about Notre Dame, about being part of something larger than themselves, is that that's what Notre Dame itself is dedicated to. If you go and visit the campus, as you know well, right in the heart of Notre Dame's campus, right next to the administration building that has the Golden Dome, is the Basilica of the Sacred Heart. And on the side of that faces the administration building is a door called Memorial Door. And above that door is an inscription that says, God, Country, Notre Dame. And those three entities symbolize the Notre Dame experience, where everything you're doing is not dedicated to football, it's not dedicated to school, it's not dedicated just to this university. Everything starts with the university's dedication to God. And after that, dedication to country. Notre Dame doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not in Russia. It's not in Japan. It's part of the United States. And Notre Dame, other than the service academies, of course the Naval Academy, the Military Academy that Jeff graduated from, produces more officers than almost any other institution in the country. More officers for our armed forces, for our Army, our Navy, our Air Force. And then Notre Dame comes third. You know, you dedicate yourself to the university after duty to God and duty to country is fulfilled. And so everyone at Notre Dame is instilled with that concept that you are part of something much larger than yourself, much larger even than the university. And it's those things that are placed at top of mind throughout your time there. That happened for me as a student. I know it happened for a lot of other people, maybe just people who've had a chance to visit. But that's where I think the answer to your question lies.
You know, and I think that resonates with the football players as well. I think they understand that they're not just playing for themselves or their families or an opportunity to get to the NFL, or not even just for Notre Dame, that they're part of a bigger cause. And I know I felt that way as a student. I continue to feel that way today from the things I learned at Notre Dame, that when I went back to my community, wherever I chose to go, and I chose to come back to my hometown in Wheeling, that when I went back there, I was supposed to still be representing Notre Dame and the ideals that Notre Dame stands for doing things the right way, honesty, Christian principles, standing up for people. And all of those things, I think, have helped me throughout my career. The fact that Notre Dame instilled those beliefs in me, those values in me, and it continues to help me today when I'm representing people that are injured, or if I'm taking on a large corporation and I may feel like, gosh, this corporation has a lot more money than I do. They can hire any lawyer they want. They can put together a team of 10 lawyers to fight us, and I got to go up against them and beat them for these people. But the spirit of the Fighting Irish is just that, and I think that continues on. Jeff, I don't know if you've experienced that as well, but I certainly have throughout my career.
For sure, and it's very important to realize that for me, my experience at Notre Dame was a little different than your experience and Chris's experience. Then you guys went to undergrad there, and I was there just for law school. But you really do feel at home there. Law school is challenging in its own ways, but in a way different than being deployed with the 3rd Infantry Division, which was the job I held right before I went to law school. And so I tend to view that as a very quiet time in my life, where I got to spend some time with my wife. Our first son, Patrick, was born there in South Bend, and it's been a neat experience to watch this Notre Dame football season through the eyes of my kids. I don't think there's anything like the sports heroes that you get when you're 10, 11, 12 years old. As you get older and you get responsibilities and you have a job and a mortgage and a family, I don't think there's anything quite as pure as that experience of having a sports hero when you're that age. And it's been great to watch this season through the eyes of my children, and that extends all the way down to my 4-year-old, who asked me the other day if he could go bowling with his best friend from preschool, and Manti Te'o was the other one that he wanted to invite to his bowling party. And it's been a real pleasure to watch this season through their eyes.
Well, and if you talk about somebody that you want your kid to look up to, there are all these different athletes, and we've seen scandals with athletes. We've seen players like Reggie Bush stripped of their Heisman Trophy, from the University of Southern California over the past several years here. But if you have an athlete that you would want your child to look up to, I mean, it would be very difficult to find someone as a better role model than Manti Te'o.
You're right. And one of the experiences, is that I'm a big baseball guy. And that's one of the experiences I try to have with my kids. And on the Hall of Fame ballot is Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds. And it's very difficult, to know who to look up to these days. And that's why instead of looking at a particular individual, although I certainly agree with you about Manti Te'o, I think you can find in these institutions that stand for the right thing, to root for Notre Dame, to root for West Point. I think that that's something that you try to instill in these kids so that they're looking for the right guiding principles rather than trying to focus on one particular individual, although Manti Te'o is surely an exception to that rule.
And Chris, speaking of Manti Te'o, one of the likely finalists for the Heisman Memorial Trophy, the votes in the final days of the voting here, and one of the things that the Heisman Trust looks at and the voters are supposed to look at are things like integrity and character and doing things the right way when making that vote. Certainly, Manti Te'o has been an excellent example of that throughout the course of this season. Of course, overcoming some personal adversity with both his grandmother and his girlfriend dying in the same week earlier in the season. Basically having to play through all that and doing it in a fine fashion, being the best player on the #1 ranked undefeated team that's going to play for the national championship. But can he and will he win the Heisman Trophy?
Well, I think there's some question that remains about that, but you make good points, Jamie. I mean, not only is Manti Te'o an outstanding football player, but he's an outstanding human being. And every time he talks about his work on the football team, his time at the university, he talks about one word that you hear again and again, and that word is service. He talks about how he loves being at Notre Dame because of the opportunity he gets to serve in terms of his fellow students, in terms of the charity work that he takes time out of what must be an impossibly busy schedule to do, and really the idea that he is in service to his teammates. He talked about how that's what true leadership is showing how dedicated you can be to the success of your teammates, and how that's how you can inspire someone. Not by calling attention to yourself, by thumping your chest after scoring your 8th touchdown against some fraudulent Big 12 defense, like some of these other Heisman candidates have been doing. But when you're actually willing to fade into the background by doing your job, by making sure, for instance, as a linebacker, that the ball doesn't come anywhere near you because you're doing your job, you're in the right position. And so nobody sees it. There's no highlight for that. There's no package on ESPN where each thing that he does right to keep his team undefeated can be praised and singled out. But nonetheless, he does those things in service to his teammates. And he's an outstanding example, and I think well-deserving of the Heisman Trophy, although I can't speak for the voters.
Yeah. And, of course, in addition to his character and the service and the things you just talked about, he's also had a great year on the field. I mean, 3rd season in a row with over 100 tackles. 7 interceptions, the most by any linebacker in the country in the last 13 seasons. He's number 2 in the country overall in interceptions, despite playing linebacker, not defensive back. Of course, the team's undefeated. And you look at all these things, and I think it makes a very, very strong case for him to win it. And I think, as Coach Kelly pointed out from Notre Dame, if Manti Te'o doesn't win the Heisman Trophy, then you might as well just call it the Offensive Player of the Year award, because a defensive player just can't win it anymore if Manti Te'o doesn't win it. And, speaking of Coach Kelly, of course, he's in his 3rd season here, and I think there's been a significant change in him throughout the course of this year. You look at his first 2 seasons on the sideline in South Bend, and things would not go right, and you'd see him getting red-faced and yelling. A lot of people were very critical of that. This year, a much calmer Brian Kelly, and I was one of the people that was upset about that. As a coach myself, I always say that you can't treat every single thing bad that happens during a football game like it's the end of the world, because bad things are going to happen during a football game. You're talking about kids that are playing a game. You have to stay calm, positive. What are we going to do on the next play? And I think he's done a much better job of that this year, and I think that's one of the big reasons that the team has been more successful. And Jeff, you were a high school quarterback, won a state championship, and have played the game. And I think that's been a big part of what's happened here.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly seems to be settling into that job in a way where he can direct that team to act in the way that he expects them to act. I'm sure if you asked him about it, I hate to speak for Coach Kelly, but what he would tell you is that fire is still there with him, and he's just settled into the job. I think that no matter how successful these coaches have been at other institutions, coming to Notre Dame for them is also a unique experience where the pressures of that job can certainly be a lot for anybody, and to have sort of the laser focus that people around the country have on that particular position. The head coach at Notre Dame is the highest profile position that there is, and he seems to be settling into it. He's got the right sort of personnel, and I think that there's nothing but a bright future for Coach Kelly at Notre Dame.
And of course he's in his 3rd season, and a lot of the great Notre Dame coaches that have won national championships have done it in their 3rd year, going back to whether it be Coach Leahy in the 40s, Coach Parsi in the 60s, Coach Devine in the 70s, Coach Holtz in the 80s, have won in their 3rd year. And I think a lot of it's because, sometimes you do have to bring about a little bit of your own stamp on the program, change the culture. And I think that, a little bit of his fieriness, so to speak, or getting upset the first couple of years was because he didn't like what he saw in terms of the dedication, the emotion, the motivation, and he was trying to change that. And now that he's kind of got it his way, now he can just let things be a little bit more calm. So I think that's making a big difference.
Well, I agree with what you guys have said, but I've got a little bit different perspective on it. I think that not only has Coach Kelly had obviously a very significant effect on our football program over the past 3 years, but I think the University of Notre Dame has had a tremendous effect on Coach Kelly. I mean, we remember those first games where, I mean, it was ugly. And I remember thinking that I don't care how many games this guy wins, he can't be red-faced and shouting in the faces of our players on national TV every week. That can't happen. And after 3 years, I think he's grown. I think the place has had an influence on him. He didn't go to Notre Dame, but now he's been there for 3 years. And after 3 years at Notre Dame, I had improved a lot, and so has he.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because one of the things that Coach Lou Holtz used to always say when he was at Notre Dame is that you don't come to the University of Notre Dame to change it. You come to the University of Notre Dame so it'll change you. And I know it certainly changed me for the better. I know from knowing you guys, it's changed us all for the better. And hopefully we can continue to do good things throughout our lives as a result of some of the things we learned at the University of Notre Dame. Guys, I appreciate you being on the show today. It was fun to talk about our alma mater and to see how they do here in the upcoming weeks. And thanks to all of our viewers for watching, and we enjoyed talking to you about the University of Notre Dame. We appreciate you being with us here on the Bordas and Bordas Legal Review. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for being with us.